So what we've got here is kind of a first working model, a dynamic model that will kind of do a proof of concept for our can crusher. Now what this is supposed to be is a can crusher that will crush an aluminum can up to the monster size cans, which I believe are 16-ounce cans, on down to the regular soda 12-ounce cans. And it needs to be compacted to no more than 1.5 inches in any direction. So it needs to be a three-dimensional can crusher. So what this is basically the three dimensions here. A can would go in here, and this is your basically your X, Y, and Z, and the can would drop in here from a hopper. Your first arm or your first plunger would come in here and crush it down to 1 inch tall. So that'll be a 1 inch, which is a little bit less than our 1.5 requirement, but we're trying to shoot a little bit lower. And then once you're down to this size, so you're 1 inch tall, then this second arm comes in and pushes it to its 1 by 1 by no more than 4. This is the stroke of these pistons, if you will. And then this last one pushes it so it's a 1 by 1 by 1 cube, at which point, I'll just pull this back up here, when it gets crushed to a 1 by 1 cube, it will actually fall right through that hole in the bottom. All of the pistons will return, or all the arms will return, and then the hopper will drop in from this side into the corner, and the process will repeat itself. So the hopper would be going along right here. And this whole thing, I'm showing it flat, but this whole thing would be tilted up on its side so that that hopper will work with gravity, but also so that the gravity will pull those out the bottom as well. But having it up at an angle like that will help the hopper work properly, so we don't have to think of some kind of strange hopper device for this. So as for the hopper, what we would want is something similar to this, which would have to be taller, of course, for the other cans. But it would just have this kind of advancing system where the can would come in the side, and it would be held here by some gearing, and then we'll have that here so that the gravity will feed the next one in. And when this arm comes up, at some point this arm will come up, and when it's reached its peak, it will trigger the mechanism to advance this one can. And that one can will come out, fall into the corner here. It will be crushed, and then your piston will come back up and trigger the mechanism again, and it will advance this, and doing the next can. So that's kind of how that will all hopefully come out. And then as for how for the pistons to move, and again, before I move on actually to that, just show you the hopper would go here, ideally, so that it clears the bottom 1 by 4 piston and the top 4 by 4 piston. And again, this will be tilted up on its corner there, so you'll actually have, this will be oriented more like this, where it's got that angle. As for how these are going to be driven, the pistons, we're still working on that, but there's a couple of ideas where you would have a motor here that would just be geared, and just advance this straight across. And that way, if you were to use some kind of linkage system, you'd have to worry about the fact that at some point this is here. This is at the motion at which it's going to be moving this. So then this motor can't have any rise without picking this back up, and we don't want that to pick back up, because our main concern is we can't just crush it. You can't just have 3 pistons where this crushes in this direction, this crushes that direction and comes back, and then this crushes in that direction and comes back, because you don't know if the can will crush evenly, essentially. So if you crush it this way, it's not going to crush into a perfect circle. And then after you've done that, if you come back up and you move this way, the same thing will happen. You won't have a perfect crush. So what this does is this almost provides a former. So this provides the top former and crushes it in the dimension that we have the most leeway in, top down. And then this comes in and crushes it this way, which prevents it from crushing any taller than 1 inch and any wider than 1 inch. And then this just comes in to finish it off, acting against the former of the fixed plates on the back and the front 2 formers here. And then this just compacts it along those sides and drops out the hole, and then everything will retract after that. So that prevents any aluminum of the can wrapping around the tools, or these plates here. And it also makes sure that we do have a 1x1 cube that will go out the bottom hole. So just in terms of the model, the plan is to have some of the layout done right on here. So we don't have to have all these pieces here for reminders, but we can make notes on this. But this basically represents the stroke here on this block, the stroke for the smaller piston here, and then just a Pepsi can there. Because we don't know, I haven't gotten my hands on a monster can size, monster can size yet. So whether it be that or a tall boy, or basically the tallest can we can find, we want to be able to accommodate that. Now the thing is, here, without a linkage, we can just have it driven by a gear here and here as well, because the stroke is only 3 inches to get to the 1 inch. So you could put a motor in this area here and drive it to 3 inches, then retract it to 3 inches. The problem with up here is that the soda can is 5 inches tall. That's just for the soda can. So we have to retract at least for that much, plus the hopper, which is going to be up 1 inch because of this plate. It has to clear this plate to drop into the corner. So we're basically working off of that. So this might have to be, upwards of about 10 inches off of this bottom plate to accommodate for the monster can size and the hopper. Now, as you can see, what that does to our arm there, the arm is actually far taller than the actual assembly, which is means that we either have to have this plate on the side here be really tall, or on this side be really tall to actually have that kind of drive mechanism. And then in which case you could put, on like a top of a plate like this, you could have that motor here that would have that many teeth to go down. But you have to have this arm go somewhere, essentially. So that's what we're working with now, and trying to get a concept of the actual size. Fortunately, we have a form factor in in the aluminum can, where it's very has a pretty tight tolerance as to the sizes of it, and we're crushing it, so it doesn't have to be such a tight tolerance anyways, because if you give yourself 1/4 of an inch on a stroke here for these 2 pistons, or up here, it isn't going to matter much in the overall size of the can after it's crushed. So we do have some leeway there, but yeah, that's basically the design, and it seems like it would work. You just have to, there's some detail things that aren't shown here, like you'd have to have this piston arm, it's all nice and good to have that kind of piston arm action, but you have to make sure that it's guided the whole way if it's not a linkage system. So you have to put a rail and that. Same for here. You'd have to put some kind of rail or some kind of guide system so that it doesn't bend. And then the only other thing we have to worry about is being able to provide enough force, because this way doesn't require a ton of force, but these 2, the smaller you get it, of course, the more force you're going to need. So even though this is the smallest piston arm, it actually requires the most amount of force. And then these 2 as well have to be able to resist this pushing it back. As we're trying to squish it this way, it's going to try to expand as it goes down. So to act as formers, these have to be able to resist that force as well. Yep. But I just, wanted to build a quick model so that we would have a spatial sense of what we'd have to work with, so that we can see the space for motors, if they need to put motors here or whatever, so we can just play around with that.